In any case, let me go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I know we'll have people filing in for the next little bit, and that's great. But since it's already after our 5:30 time slot for beginning, I'm going to introduce my guest today. Emma Lyons has a Substack called Trauma Matrix, and so that's Trauma Matrix substack.com, and I highly recommend that you subscribe and you start reading what she has to say. She is quite a powerhouse. If you've followed these interviews for any length of time, you'll know that I've interviewed Dea DeVitas recently, who is absolutely amazing. I interviewed Shamananda Lee, another incredible Substack writer, and there are a couple of other writers that I hope to women writers on consciousness and boundary pushing material that's really incredible. Angela Morris and April Novoa. So if I were creating a high consciousness, cutting edge Substack female basketball team, that would be my starting five along with Emma. Woo! So yeah, and we'd be really good. We'd be really, really good. So you wouldn't want to mess with us.
Definitely no.
All right. So I want to read you a little bit of what Emma is about to just frame this conversation from the get go. She is a trauma informed healer and founder of the Trauma Matrix. She describes doing everything right for years, therapy, yoga, energy work, but she still felt stuck in burnout and invisibility. And then she discovered that she had what she describes as an internalized covert narcissist system, and she carried the scapegoat shame that was not her own. So once she saw this, she describes how everything shifted, and she realized the loops keeping me stuck weren't personal failings, they were inherited survival patterns. And so now she is devoted to helping high functioning, heart led women dismantle their inner narcissist, the shame voice that controls, humiliates, and impersonates them, so they can reclaim clarity, power, and nervous system freedom, which is really, really interesting. And as I have processed her numerous articles, I feel very strongly that this is also for men, and for anyone who identifies as anything, as long as they're a human being, because this is really, we're all kind of in this matrix until we're not. And so we have to learn how to deal with this. So I want to welcome you, Emma, to Conversations on Saul Luckman Uncensored.
Yay! So great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Right on. I'm gonna brag. I'm gonna flex. I found you very early on. I don't know how I discovered you in my Substack feed, but there you were, and I started reading what you were up to, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really, really right up my alley. And I'm so glad she's saying the quiet part out loud about the weaponization of shame in our culture and how debilitating it is on so many levels. And you kind of unpack that in different ways in different articles. You have different optics. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate that you have a kind of 360 view of this. It's not myopic, it's not simplistic, because it's not a simple phenomenon. And so I wanted to ask you just to start with, if you could give us a little more background for how you came to discover this piece, and you were describing just right when we came on, while people were coming into the chat, how it almost felt like you were channeling this information. So maybe we could pick up where we left off there.
It definitely did. So what happened was, since I was a child, I've always felt, there was something wrong with me, that I'm defective, that I was stupid, that I was ugly, that, all of these things. And all this time I thought my family was normal and loving, no problem. But what I realized well into adulthood really was, the hidden dysfunction in my family. My mother, she kind of ticks every single box of the covert narcissist, and her mother, my grandmother, seems to have been a malignant narcissist. And what I realized is when I started reading about, family systems, dysfunctional family systems, how someone is selected to be the scapegoat. And that person, basically, you carry all the shame that nobody else wants to look at in the family system. And I was like, bingo, this is me. I wasn't the problem. It was the whole system. And then I started seeing, how this same pattern of, the enabler, the golden child, these are all um, kind of characters or roles that are put on children in dysfunctional families. And, most families are dysfunctional. It's estimated between 7 and 8 out of 10 families in the United States, for example, are dysfunctional, carry some dysfunction. So it's a matter of degree rather than if or not in a lot of cases. And when I started to realize that I'd been the scapegoat and that my whole family system is basically, in denial about their trauma, I started really seeing that this was why I've been, child. I thought it was normal to want to unalive myself when I was a child, when I was a teenager. I thought everyone went through that, but it turns out that that shame was was what I was forced to carry from my family, and that's true in every dysfunctional family. They'll choose someone to kind of be the breaker of this shame. It's mostly shame. It's a bunch of other stuff as well, like guilt and uh, yeah, a lot of guilt and trauma. But really, what I found is that without the shame is kind of the glue that keeps it going. Because if you look at
Mm.
animals, big animals experience trauma, but they don't keep talking about it and experience trauma about it 20 years later unless they've been around unless they've been around human beings. And the difference is shame. Shame is what keeps that trauma stuck and moving down. It's what keeps the intergenerational trauma game being passed down from one generation to the next. And then I started looking outside and seeing that this pattern, it's kind of fractal. It happens everywhere. You see people being scapegoated in corporations, in communities, you see it in governments, in intergovernment systems. So, and this thing about the golden child and the favorite one, and it's all driven by shame, and it's absolutely everywhere. And then I realized that, with this scapegoat thing, I'd kind of internalized that inner voice that I have that a lot of people call the inner critic. I realized that it ticks every single box of the narcissist. It's grandiose. It thinks it's better than you. It'll tell you what to do. It's very, very shaming. And I realized that my voice is a narcissist. And it's really funny because out there in the world, when they're talking about narcissists, they tell you to don't defend, don't engage, just walk away. But with this inner critic, we're told that it's just a wounded child, that you need to send love to it, you need to take it to therapy. And this is a thing that you should not do with a narcissist. And this inner critic, this shame voice, it's a freaking narcissist that we've all internalized. And it's particularly in Western culture. The shame is so deeply entrenched in our culture. And particularly in the Western world, because it kind of comes from this Christian template, which really started the weaponization and the spread of this kind of individualized shame, this belief that there's something wrong with you, that you're a sinner, and that you have to forgive. So if you just think about that for a second, that's a huge double bind. And even if you're not a Christian, if you're living in a Christian society, it's kind of like the air that we're all breathing in. So it kind of teaches you.
Absolutely, you write beautifully. You have wanted to call attention to the one of the lead blogs, the shame implant, how Western
Yes.
culture wired us to hate ourselves, and you really do talk about sort of the predating even of Christianity, but then you have the whole Adam and Eve eating of the fruit and the kind of shame being codified into culture. And I also wanted to point out for people listening to this conversation, I mean, we're sort of speaking from a psychological perspective here, but if you've been following my work, you know that the shame voice that Emma is describing is the voice of the dragon. It is the inherited operating system of our spiritual adversary using using this narcissistic personality to basically co-opt your own thought process.
100%. And you know what? The crazy thing is in the psychotherapy world, even in spirituality, they tell you to coddle this voice, to send it love, to, take it to therapy. But really, it's just a parasite. The narcissist is a parasite. And
Absolutely.
they punch you in the face, they kick you in the balls, and then they tell you that they're doing it, they did it for you to keep you safe.
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
just
not
tough love, right?
Oh yeah, so I'm trying to keep you safe, and we're told that everywhere. That inner critic that says, "Don't go up on that stage. Who are you to start a Substack or YouTube?" That it's trying to keep you safe. It's not trying to keep you safe. It's trying to keep it safe, just like the narcissist, exactly the same. But we're taught to coddle this thing, and that's the wrong thing to do with a narcissist. You need to cut off its power because it is a parasite. Now, if you have a parasite in your digestive tract, you don't send it love and, take it to therapy. You flush that thing out. And that's what you got to do with this narcissist as well, because it is not looking out for you. It's actually trying to destroy you and keep itself alive, just like the narcissists out there in the world.
Absolutely. And well stated. A lot of the work that I'm sharing these days has to do with taking back your power, literally taking your energy back from this
Yes.
this entity, this parasite. I've called it the dragon, I've called it the great
Mhm.
parasite. And I share different techniques, energetic techniques, sound healing techniques, consciousness and visualization, breath work, shamanic recapitulation, other things of this nature to allow people to begin literally taking back the chi, the prana, the life force, the consciousness that has been
Yeah.
stolen from them. So this is what I've discovered that has worked for me and a lot of other people. But I'm curious what you would foreground in terms of recommendations for people out there, just maybe not on the spirituality wavelength as much or whatever. How can people begin to address this problem from where they're coming from in more of the mainstream culture?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, I suppose my work is a little bit more psychological in nature. I lean into that, although also energetic. But what I realize is that shame is really the tool, the main strategy that I call it the inner narcissist, that it uses against you. And the cool thing is, the more you unhook or you exorcise, I talk about like exercising this shame voice, this inner narcissist, the the more immune to shaming that you become, because you can only experience shame when that voice agrees. If I was talking to someone on a podcast a few weeks ago, and she was talking about her aunt when she was a child, and she was kind of pudgy and she was eating ice cream. And this grown man comes up to her and tells them, "You shouldn't be eating ice cream, it'll make you fat." And this girl, she laughed in his face. So shaming is an inside job. People can only shame you if you have that little inner voice. I call it the inner narcissist that says, "Yes, you are fat. Yes, you do have a big nose. Yes, you are stupid." Then you'll experience shame. Otherwise, you'll just be like, "Oh my God, that person is crazy." You'll recognize that it's a projection and that it has nothing to do with you. And you'll do just like the Buddha did and return it to sender and not take it in. And this is the power. Like, I've been on a lot of podcasts recently, and a lot of the hosts have been saying that, even just hearing about this has really changed the way they think about and conceptualize shame, because we're generally taught that shame is good for you, that it's a moral compass. It's kind of like a get out of jail card, in our culture, in our twisted culture. "Oh, I've done so many bad things, but I feel shame about it. So that still means I'm a good person." So shame is really pushed as a way as a compass to recognize that you're a good person, when really shame is the worst indicator of changing of behavior. The thing is, it's very effective in the moment. If I have a child here that's talking and I want to shut him up, I shame him and very quickly he gets quiet. But in terms of medium to long term, it doesn't change his behavior. And medium to long term, shame doesn't work to change people's behavior. It works in the short term. It looks very impressive, and that's why we all do it. And we all do it. It's culturally, your parents shame their kids, teachers shame their students. It's absolutely everywhere, because we're taught that shame is the way to keep people in line. I think I was talking to you recently, someone on someone read my article on Substack and they were like, "How dare you criticize shame? We need shame for the pedophiles." And I'm like, well, that hasn't worked. We've been shaming pedophiles for thousands of years. And, Epstein obviously didn't get the memo.
Absolutely.
Shame does not work to change your behavior. We need more empathy, not shame. And even our language, it reinforces it. Like, you're shameless. You have no shame. So we're it's constantly being pushed that we need shame in order to be a good person, but you need the right amount of shame, otherwise you'll be shameful. So you just need the perfect amount of shame according to society to be a good person. But shame is the hook that makes you manipulative. The way to not be manipulatable, nobody can manipulate you. You step outside that framework, is you release yourself from this inner narcissist and you become unshameable. No, people can try to shame you and you'll just be like, I see that's a projection, and you will not take it in. You will not experience shame. And this is the thing, when from my childhood, I experienced so much shame, like constantly. And since I've kind of channeled this information, I've started to realize how toxic shame is every single time. And even people like Brene Brown that talk about shame is so normalized. Even Brene Brown, she does a great TED talk about shame, but then she says, if you don't experience shame, that would make you a psychopath. And this is complete BS. It just shows you how normalized even people like John Bradshaw wrote a great book about shame, the shame that binds you. And he identified it as one of the key factors in alcoholism and all kinds of addictions. Shame is kind of a required substrate for that. And even in things like genocide, shame has to be there. It's an essential substrate. So on so many different levels, shame is super toxic. But you wanted to ask me a question. Go ahead.
Well, it was something you said just a moment ago. You mentioned needing the right amount of empathy,
Mm,
and
yeah.
an antidote to this toxic shame. And the first thing that popped into my mind when you said that was, oh, people are going to confuse this with compassion or kindness. That we all, we got, Karened into kindness during all the COVID madness. And so can you speak to what empathy is in your model? Because in my way of seeing things, it's not in any way allowing yourself to be pushed around just so somebody can offload their narcissism onto you.
And that's exactly what shame is. When I shame someone, I, feel a bit better. I shame them. Oh, I made her feel bad. So it gives you a little hit. And that's the thing. It makes you feel it's a narcissistic trait that we've all kind of breathed in. It gives us a relief from our own shame in the moment, and it makes us feel powerful because like you made that person feel bad. Yeah. So it's nasty stuff. And what we need to create long-standing change is not shame. Shame doesn't work. We need empathy. And guess what? What shame shuts down in the brain, it shuts down our ability to empathize. So if the
Classic.
we classic, and even psychopaths themselves, they're not the problem with psychopaths is not that they don't experience shame, it's that they don't experience empathy. That's the real problem. That's why you can't shame a psychopath. They learn how to shame others because shame is absolutely everywhere. Now, narcissists are a bit different because narcissism is born out of repressed shame. So, if you look at Donald Trump, for example, if he was a psychopath, comedians would be making jokes and he wouldn't care. But he's triggered by that. His repressed shame is triggered. And this is why he feels like he needs to react to that.
Mm,
He needs to respond to that because he experienced all that shame that's been pushed down since childhood. So narcissism is shame, and we don't need more shame. We need more empathy. We need more compassion, and shame actually shuts down our ability to empathize. Like if you just think about it, if when you're having a shame attack, you start your body actually closes. You
mm.
shut down, you internalize everything. It puts you into survival mode like no other emotion. Not even fear comes close. And the thing like shame is often talked about as the feeling that I'm a bad person, I'm defective. But actually, shame, it's a whole cocktail of a bunch of different emotions. Disgust turned inwards, anger turned inwards, resentment against the self, anger, fear, all these things stirred up. It's basic Shame is basically self-attack. It's 100% self-attack. And then all of these beliefs and thoughts that I'm bad, there's something wrong with me, that all that stuff is downstream from that cocktail. And when we're in shame, we're not we feel attacked, so we go into defense mode, we go into freeze mode, we go into fight mode. If somebody makes a constructive criticism, we don't think, oh, that's very nice that we feel attacked, we feel like our physical safety is attacked, so we go into attack mode. This is why you see people in cults and narcissistic systems, and they're absolutely everywhere. If you say anything about them, they feel personally attacked and they start to attack you back. Um, and this
I,
is this is all driven by shame.
I don't know if you're aware, but I have a book called The World Cult and You, which looks at the whole world as a gigantic cult that uses
Oh,
shaming, shaming, and other tactics to control the herd. Really,
we are
and
100% on the same page there, so that's exactly what's happening.
so,
And
so the what I wanted to ask you is, well, there's so many questions that come up as you unpack all of this amazing work that you're doing. One question I would have for you is, how do you work in the shame empathy equation, with and the narcissism part of that equation, with this very trendy concept that I've written about and everyone else seems to be talking about it these days, authenticity? How would
yeah.
what is authenticity in this discussion?
Well, authenticity is the opposite of shame. It's the opposite end of the stick of shame, because shame said there's something wrong with you, you're defective, you have to hide. So
I
that's
love
the other
that.
thing. When you're carrying shame, you cannot be authentic. So this is why I struggled for so long to be successful, because I was being run by shame. Shame said you're not. So even when I was showing up on social media and doing the things, I wasn't being myself, because shame was there running the show saying there's something wrong with me, you have to hide, so you can't be visible. Even if you are physically being visible, if shame is running you, you're not being authentic. So you're not going to attract the right people into your business and into your world, because you're being driven by shame. You're going to attract unaligned people, or continue to kind of have these self-sabotage cycles that I experienced. And let me just say that people do not want to talk about shame, because shame is a dirty word, and people would rather call it imposter syndrome, procrastination, self sabotage, blah, blah, blah. So many things that are directly, shame is the root cause of all of these
Mm,
things. And rather than so many people out there are just playing whack-a-mole with a bunch of symptoms. And until you address the root, which is the shame, it's just going to keep coming back. I mean, if you think about imposter syndrome for a moment, something that really affects women, because women collectively, we have been scapegoated, by the patriarchy, by, men and society, so we're carrying that as well. So this is why, women especially, we're like crabs in the barrel. When someone tries to get out, we shame them and pull them down.
yes,
Because
yes,
yeah, and women are terrible for that. But it makes us feel, like I said, when we shame someone, we suddenly feel so powerful. It gives us that narcissistic hit. So we're all doing it. We're all guilty of it in that sense. And we have the power to unhook from it one by one, because God knows it's not going to change from the top down. It's going to change from the ground up. And that's what we can do. We each of us has the power to unhook from shame. And the first step in that is what I really would love for people to get from this conversation. First thing, to recognize that shame is always, always toxic. And it's never ever helpful. Like, if you just think about, shame, how you were shamed in your life, or how you shamed other people, it might have looked effective in the moment, but just watch and you'll see it's always about the comfort of the person doing the shaming. Like, if I shame a child here who's talking and bothering me, I might tell myself, I'm trying to protect him, trying to make sure he's learning. But the real truth is, It's about my comfort. And that's always the way with shame. It's always about the comfort of the person doing the shaming. We might fool ourselves and say, oh, I'm trying to keep them safe or do it for him. But no, I'm doing it for me. The shaming is all about keeping me up and keeping the other person down. So it's always a manipulation. And once you recognize shame as a manipulation constantly, you can start breaking that cycle with yourself and, slowly repattern yourself to become unshameable and really take back your power and, reclaim your shameless. That's what I call it. My program is called Reclaim Your Shameless because that word, shameless, in English language, it's a slur. You're so shameless. It means
Reclaim
you're
your
acting.
shameless.
Exactly. You've got to reclaim every other word in the English language that ends in less means you do not have that thing. But people who we call shameless are often, like, if you think about drunk people and stuff like that, they're often acting out of 9 times out of 10. They're acting out of repressed shame. So I want to reclaim that word. No shame is a good thing. Being shameless is your only true way to reclaiming your power because while you are run from shame, you can, first of all, you're not being you're not being true to yourself. You're being manipulated by everyone. You're actively being manipulated from everyone who wants to shame you. So when you unhook yourself from your own inner narcissist, you become unshameable, you become unstoppable. And that's what shameless is really about. It's becoming unstoppable, becoming your true the essence of who you really are and really shining your light in the world shamelessly.
I love that, and I think it would be a brilliant book title because eventually, you're going to have to cross that bridge and put
Yeah,
this into a book.
I definitely have a bookload of because one of my articles was about the fractal nature of this shame network. So it's I go back in history. I've kind of touched on it a bit in the Substack, but yeah, I definitely would love to write a book about this, but that's for something later down the line. But
Absolutely,
shame,
but the
shame,
title would play beautifully.
yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, and so as you're describing it, I saw this continuum between shame and authenticity. Most people
Yes.
are not at one end or the other. They're somewhere on the continuum, right? And you could sort of judge your healing or your self mastery, if you want to put it in those kind of terms, by how close you are to achieving authenticity, which is for you to decide because it's how you feel internally versus how you're acting externally, right? That those have to meet and conflate. So you are your own judge there in terms of discerning how much you're lying to yourself, I suppose, or how much of the narcissist you're believing would be another way of looking at that. So I want people to realize that this is not a one and done or an either or. It's really a both and situation, and all of us are somewhere on this path of becoming.
Yeah, but you can break up with your inner narcissist and really claim your own power and become, these are the people who are really on fire. I'm still on my way. I'm still, but I am so much better than I used to be in terms of shame. When shame starts, I used to get shame attacks. I don't know if you've ever had a shame attacks, but
I have. I absolutely have. I had a lot of bullying and shaming when I was young,
yeah.
and a lot of unprocessed trauma from that. And a few years ago, I broke up with what I realized was a kind of online truther cult, and tremendous shaming and attacking came at me, and that I had really had to stand my ground. And that's when I wrote "The World Cult and You" as a way of just speaking my truth.
100%. And, social media is where it's all at with shaming now as well. The whole culture is built around this false idea that shame will change people's behavior. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's absolutely because if I say you're bad, that doesn't help you change your behavior, does it, Saul? It's the opposite end of the stick of, actually recognizing I've done something bad and I need something that maybe I shouldn't have. You don't need to attack yourself to do that. You don't need to be attacked. You don't even need to feel bad to recognize that you've hurt someone. You can just change your behavior. And shame is actually a huge impediment to that. rather than any kind of catalyst for changing behavior. It does the exact opposite.
But it does so on purpose, right? I mean, there is an agenda here at various levels, whether we're looking at the Catholic Church or using, weaponized guilt and shame or whatever it might be. There seems to be, especially in the West, but I would argue this is a worldwide phenomenon because people are controlled in slightly more subtle ways, perhaps in many Eastern countries. But believe me, having lived there, they are controlled and well controlled. Japan comes to mind. So yeah, so there's definitely a kind of worldwide cultural program to not look at this in a productive, healthy way like you're doing, but to actually weaponize this emotion in particular. But I think there is a whole suite of emotions that goes along with it in order to keep people's heads down, to
Yes,
literally enslave people's energy and consciousness. And I use that term, which is a kind of a hot button term, but I really do mean that people are enslaved by this type of emotion. They are not free, and therefore they are slaves.
I totally agree. And yeah, shame is the way that you are controlled when you unhook from your inner narcissist. Like I said, no one can shame you. You return, you see the deflection. Shame is always a deflection, and you don't take it in. You don't take it in like that girl's, with the ice cream. You laugh in their face in the face of shame, and you don't take it in, and that is possible. And yeah, talking about the different forms of shame, I've kind of broken it down because there's the kind of Western idea of shame, which is what you see mostly in books and things when they're talking about shame. It's very Eurocentric, and this is the idea that I'm bad. There's something wrong with me, and it's what I call individualized shame. So this is the kind of I'm bad personally. There's something wrong with you. It's kind of in me as an individual, I'm defective. And you can see that everywhere in Western culture. If we look at pre-Christian culture or, in Asia, they have a slightly different shade of shame. And again, shame is deadly. Shame is what causes people to unalive themselves. So, without shame, I don't think anyone, no matter how bad your life gets, you need shame to be there for you to actually take that action. And I've spent a lot of time, when my shame was really bad, I've felt that way lots of times. And my inner narcissist was gone full on killer mode. You might as well not be here. And I bought into that stuff. But
Mm, mm.
in the East, they have a slightly different form of shame, or in pre-Christian Ireland or pre-Christian other cultures, they had a kind of collectivized shame. So this was kind of tribal, the honor code. If you step outside what's honorable, then you're shamed for that. And again, very toxic. It's what causes people to unalive themselves and all these in Japan, and because they feel so much shame. But it's a slightly different flavor, if you like, of shame than we have in the West. At least in the East, it's kind of something that you've done, perhaps, but whereas in the West, you're just born a sinner, there's something defective. It's this kind of individualized. It feels even more virulent, but all shame is extremely toxic every single time.
Now, during the whole COVID era, we saw the metastasis of this super shaming with Karens, and a lot of people were like, "Well, I hate that we gave that figure a woman's name," but I'm like, "But that is appropriate in a way here because of the way that the crabs in the barrel tend to work, as you put it. There is just that is a classic behavior that got put on such a stage and kind of uh, green lit. It was okay to do this, and then, so everybody started doing it. And this was also the moment in time. Maybe people were home, or maybe I was just more aware because I was paying more attention to everything that was going on. This was when I realized that, oh my God, this we now live in not just a shaming. Well, it is a shaming culture, a culture of shame. And I'd never heard of terms like doxing and that sort of thing. And I'm like, oh my God. And so it's been weaponized politically, and
Yeah.
both sides do it. I mean, frankly, I think I'm not political at all. I think the left has cornered the market on the worst forms of shame in some ways, but the right does it as well. And it's just all over the place. And I don't know how we could possibly, on a social level, ever get to the root of it, because what you're describing works individually, but now this is a kind of disease of the matrix. It's literally like a computer virus, and and I don't know what we could possibly do on a collective level to right this thing.
Well, yeah, we got to do it. We got to do it individually. That's important. But also, there've got to be collective movements. And I mean, I talk about the fractal nature of shame, but until we deal with it as an individual, none of that collective stuff is going to land. So it needs to start with us as individuals and people who have released their shame, and aren't operating from shame or operating from authenticity, as we said. Then we have a chance to create new systems and ways to elevate society. But while we're all operating from shame, that's impossible. So,
So how does one basically respond to people who are shaming when one has become a lot more authentic? What type of rhetorical devices, what strategies? For example, I write satire, but is that a form of shaming? What are we looking at here? Can you call something what it is and have that not be shaming, but simply speaking the truth? At what point in time, where's the line between simply identifying what's going on, speaking your truth, and shaming someone else? It's very hard because I have gotten this question, and I didn't know how you would respond. I have some more thoughts on it, but I didn't want to prescript that.
no, I think that's a great question. And sometimes people can experience shame without the other person actually being shaming. Because again, like I said previously, it's not about what is said, it's about the hook. If you like what the inner narcissistic voice says that makes you experience shame. Like if there's no hook there, nobody can shame you. If somebody says you have a big nose, in order for you to experience shame, you need to have that little voice in your head saying, "Yeah, your nose is big and ugly," and then you'll experience shame. So we've got to do this is a narcissistic strategy. So we've got to treat it just like a narcissist. And I do have a strategy for kind of breaking up with shame, which I can go through in a second.
Yes,
But really, we don't need to teach the person doing the shaming. We just need to return it to sender, because in that moment they are behaving as a narcissist. They're getting, you can't try to teach with them. You don't try to argue with the narcissist. You just quietly take back your power.
I love that.
Drop the rule. Drop
I
the
love
rose.
that.
Don't argue with people who are shaming you. Just walk away. Because in that moment, that person, when you shame someone, you are operating just like a narcissist. And we've all done that. And I've done a lot of shaming with my inner narcissist shaming me, but also I've shamed other people. Of course I have. It's like,
Right,
I
right.
mean, talking about the matrix, the coding system of this matrix is shame. Like I said before, the
Absolutely.
trauma matrix, we think we're free, but we're all operating on trauma loops. And the thing that keeps all that trauma going from generation, the glue that keeps that going from generation to generation, keep going for 20, 30 years, it's shame. It's internalized shame and shame that we're breathing in from everywhere. And we can break up with our inner narcissist and take back our power. And then we start to build systems. We start to spread this information and start to talk about it. And I'm visualizing myself doing a TED talk about shame, because nobody else is talking about shame that I've seen the same way that I am. Like I would love to have a TED talk and talk about how toxic shame is every single time, how it's the exact opposite of accountability, and how we need to stop shaming each other and stop shaming ourselves, because it is. And if we look at the culture, it's not just women who shame ourselves, it's men. The hustle culture. You got to fight, you got to prove, you got to make the money. It's
Yes,
so
yes.
shaming as well. And Western culture, capitalistic culture, it's like you got to prove, you got to make more money. Again, it's operating from that shaming code. So shame is the kind of code of this trauma matrix. So the way we make the system collapse is to go straight to the code, and that is the shame.
I love that. I love all of that. There's a chapter in my most recent book, Get Out of Here Alive. It's on inner alchemy, and it's called "Speak Powerfully with Silence." And I quote Will Rogers, who says, "Never miss a good chance to shut up." Right.
Exactly. I love that.
And so basically, and I'm not only talking about shame in that discussion, but I do talk about conflict resolution and personal boundaries, and and also sort of an idea of wu wei, having the balance between the inner and the outer, knowing when not to control, or that sort of thing. All of these are really important things to consider as strategies for dealing with, especially this type of situation with a narcissistic or a conflictual situation.
Yes. Yeah. And the really powerful thing, the power move here is recognizing that this internalized voice is what shames you. And you can break up with that. And that's what I help people do. You break up with that voice and you become unshameable. And you become unstoppable. The more shameless you become, the more unstoppable you become, because that means you become more and more authentic and you start really shining your power out into the world rather than hiding. And shame, physiologically, it makes you hide. I looked at pictures of me as a child, like, and my upper lip was basically invisible. Like, shame contorts your body physically. It makes you crush in on yourself and physically hide. So, and we're brainwashed. We're in a collective trance here where we're all told that shame is good for you and you need to feel shame in order to be a good person. It's completely BS. Shame is the
Absolutely.
code of the trauma matrix. It's how we are controlled, like you said, Saul. And we take back our power by rejecting shame and stopping shaming ourselves and shaming other people. Stop participating in that system.
Now, I would love to hear, your strategy, or if you could share more about that. I wanted to say that there's this phenomenon that happens in shamanism and inner alchemy when you do a lot of this power reclamation, and you get to a certain level where that voice actually goes away. And
Yes,
it
yeah,
might happen intermittently at first, but then it can be permanent. And
it can.
but
It
the
can.
twist in the story is that we are in such a kind of Stockholm syndrome as a species,
Exactly.
that when that voice goes away and it's gone, you would think it would be cause for tremendous celebration, but it can be one of the most existentially horrifying moments in your life as a spiritual seeker, until you kind of deal with it and then move forward in silence.
Yeah, I agree. Where it's a collective delusion. I believe like societies that were really in the land that weren't hierarchical, really, because I mean, if we look at pre-Columban societies, in Latin America, like the Incas, they were narcissistic societies too. Like they're literally the pyramid, so they had a certain amount of shaming, like that kind of honor code of shaming. They didn't have the individualized kind of shaming that we have in the West. But then the new template of the Spaniards, the English came along and kind of their empire, which carried a ton of shame,
A
a
ton.
whole another layer of shame. And one of the articles that I wrote on Substack, I focus on Ireland because that's where I'm from. And I talk about how Catholicism in Ireland kind of paved the way. It brought in this idea of shaming. Shame, and there's something wrong with you. And it kind of paved the way for the British to actually colonize the land.
I completely agree with that. The same thing happened in Scotland to a lesser degree, perhaps. No doubt about it.
And you can see it in Latin America. It's the brought in the shame, the guilt. That wasn't the same in, pre-Christian societies. It wasn't, in cultures that were more nomadic, that I don't believe they were built on shame, and like we alluded to earlier in this conversation, you can look at the whole story of Adam and Eve as an allegory for shame and how it started. And the blaming of women for that, shame is the fall of the human species. And when we reject shame, we take back our power and we start fully elevating and reclaiming the truth of who we are. When we're carrying shame, we have no hope. And
Well,
this
that
is what,
that's kind of the poisoned apple in
yeah,
this story, this cultural mythology that you're talking about. There's another twist that I've uncovered that really doesn't sit well with a lot of truther types who are always, fighting the good fight and all of that. And that is this idea that this inner narcissist, the dragon, the spiritual adversary, is also a kind of weird teacher, and it's using these things that irritate us and limit us so that we will unchain ourselves from its operating system once
yeah,
and for all, and then we truly individualize, and then it's actually possible, to individuate and then matriculate from the matrix. And I'd explore exactly what that means on a kind of energetic level as we build our inner energy and create a philosopher's stone, and we literally are capable of becoming immortal. And that may be a strange thing for some people to consider, but in any case, it's been written and talked about for many, many centuries, so lots of people have had this on their mind. The idea here that is most appropriate, or applicable to this conversation, is that there is a kind of weird backhanded gift from the dragon in all of this shame. And I'm not saying shame is ever a good thing, but it's what it's using and what we've accepted. But our path forward is to give it back.
100%. And this aligns with what they say in books like The Course in Miracles. It is the separation, guilt and shame both. Although shame is completely indefensible, I think you could argue that we need some in our at our level of consciousness, we need a bit of guilt. Maybe some people do. You need to feel bad you've done something wrong, but we definitely 100% never need to feel shame in order to take responsibility and change our behavior. So shame is the separation, you know? Shame is that separation from God, the universe, from the truth of who we are. Whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But shame is the key to that separation. And the more we reject it and stop engaging with shame, the more power we get to take back and the more power we reclaim in our lives and in our whole, we become who we were meant to be.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, in about 10 minutes, if you don't mind, take us through some pointers for doing this process on an individual level. And then we'll entertain some questions at the end of this hour.
Yeah, so I have a system for breaking up with shame, and I mean I have a free gift as well for everyone. If you check out my post, you can see. But the system that I have is called Break. So BREAK. So first one is B. You've got to break the trance first of all, because this is a shame trance that we're all collectively under. So when shame attacks, that voice comes and it says, "You're late, you're stupid," or whatever you're fat, you've got cellulite, whatever the BS comes. Recognize that this is not your voice, that this is like a spell that we're under. It's a pattern, it's a trance. And you catch it, you interrupt it, don't overthink it, just recognize this is a trance. And that disrupts the loop in me instantly. So that's the first thing,
That's
break the
great.
trance.
Great.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll do that in this conversation. People will start to break the trance. Then R, you refuse to engage. So when shame strikes, you don't stop trying to explain it. You don't explain or defend against it. You just drop the rope. You don't argue with a trance or, an illusion. Dr. Ramani, who's the expert in narcissists out there in the world, she talks about deep. Don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. Just say, not today. Not today, bitch. Not today, Satan. You
That's
don't you
great.
don't need to be stop. You don't need to be polite to this thing. It's trying to destroy your life. You don't owe it anything. And this is where I have such a problem with the kind of therapeutic world. I mean, I was even talking to someone on Substack recently, and he had been told by his therapist that it's good that you experience shame because you've done so many bad things. I mean, this is what therapists are being
Wow.
told. So again, shame is a huge. It's pushed as a moral compass, and I hope people will get it from this conversation that it's not. So break the trance, refuse to engage, then you want to expose the lie. So call out the shame-based programming, whatever it's saying that you've got cellulite, that you're too old, that you're too young. What does that mean anyway? Relative to what? This is control. This is not my story. And speaking that really disarms its power. So expose the lie. Whatever it's saying, it's not an empirical truth. Then you want to anchor it in your body. So come back to your body, feel your breath, because like you said, or like we said earlier, shame, it kind of takes over your body. It's a full body hijack. And exactly, I've said before, it's like we have Stockholm syndrome with shame as a society, and we got to break up with that. Let's just cut it out. So you want to come back to your body, feel your breath. It takes over your body like no other emotion. Not even fear comes close. So come back to your body, feel your breath, plant your feet, say your name and the year, and really remind your nervous system that you're safe, that you're sovereign, and that you're here, that you're fine. And then K is kick it out. And this is something that you can do physically because it physically takes over your body. It's like it makes you shrink. It makes you go into survival mode. So you want to shake it out, stomp it out, say it aloud. This is not mine. Return to sender. Do not take it in. And that is how you reject. It's not even rejecting. You just don't take it in. You don't take it in. You don't lift the rope. And the thing is, so many people have been practicing shame for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You may have a process to go through, and this is what I do with people to start really telling your system that you don't need shame anymore to move forward, that shame is actually an impediment to your growth. Not You don't shame yourself into a better body. Stop shaming yourself and break that habit, break this Stockholm syndrome that you have internalized with shame. And this is how you reclaim your true self and your real power.
So break is so you break the trance. You refuse to negotiate or engage. You E is what?
Expose the lie.
Expose the lie.
Pull out the shame-based programming. I should be further along. I should be making so much money. This is control. This is not truth. And speaking that disarms it. Then A is anchored in your body. So that's go back to the breath, feel your feet, feel your feet on the floor. And K is kick it out. So physically you can shake it out, shake it off.
That's fantastic. That gets back into a lot of the somatic experiencing and Paul Levine's work, Waking the Tiger. I think that's the name of the book, and this
Yeah.
idea that you can actually shake out this trauma from your system physically. It helps to do so.
Fine. And animals do that all the time. Animals that have been chased by a lion or something or a leopard, if they survive it, they have a good shake. They have a good shake. They shake out all the trauma and then go back about their business. Humans don't do that. They'll be thinking about it 20 years later. Oh my God, when I was being chased by the lion, the glue that keeps that going is the shame.
100% agree with that. I completely agree. I really feel that shame is the inroad for this energy to set up shop in the body as a pattern.
Yeah, it's the code for, to use my language, it's like the coding system for the trauma matrix. Without shame, it can't operate. The whole thing collapses on itself.
Yes, absolutely. That is brilliant. Your system is really brilliant. Please go to traumamatrix.substack.com. Please subscribe. And on that website, you can download the break protocol that Emma just went over. So please do all of that. Also, while I am thinking of it, before we end here in a few minutes after some questions, please like this conversation if you've found value in it and enjoyed it. It's really helpful to show people that this was something that people thought was interesting. Also, you'll be able to share this sometime as of sometime this evening, you'll be able to share the recording. So please restack it. That would be fantastic. I've lost Emma for the moment.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here. I was looking at I was looking at the notes that people have put on the bottom.
Yes, yes. We're going to look for some questions. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, and there was something else I was going to say. Also, yes, please support my channel, saulluckman.substack.com. So you can come by there and give me a subscription and explore what I have to offer as well. And as you can probably tell, there are many intersections between my work and Emma's. It's quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah. Looking from a slightly different angle, but all the angles are so valuable.
Absolutely, and there are tools that that both of us offer to help with this situation, this kind of shamification
Yes.
of the human spirit.
Yeah.
So, do we have any questions? If you would like to ask a question of Emma or myself or of both of us, please write that in the chat. Right now, I'm not seeing any questions because it's we just put this out there. But if you do have a question, please let us know. You said that you've not gotten into the potential book at this point in time, but you've given it some thought.
Oh yeah. I have a whole framework of the kind of origin of this shame trauma trauma matrix. Yeah. It's like taking it back to other civilizations and see how it's got us to this kind of late stage capitalist society where we are basically all being driven and controlled by shame in a very overt manner, you know. So
It is so incredibly overt. I mean, it's always been there, and in different eras, it was I suppose overt if you knew what you were looking for, but it's so in your face at this point in time.
and the thing is, babies aren't born with it, but scientists will from the West because they think shame is innate rather than a concept that is taught to us, which is what I'm saying that it is. So babies don't experience shame. Babies are shameless. They have no shame. And they don't worry about how you're feeling. When they're hungry, they don't feel bad about it. They're completely free. Shame is something that we're taught, and we're taught shame so that we can be controlled. And that's the only good thing that, if you could call it a good thing, that's the only thing that shame does. It doesn't have any other good functions. If we look at other negative emotions like anger, I feel angry. Anger can be very destructive, but also if somebody crosses my boundary, I get angry and I tell them to stop and keep away from me. That's important. Same with other things. Even, guilt can be some people could argue that guilt can be useful because I recognize I've done something bad, so I could change my behavior. Um, Although, I mean, I would argue that we don't really need guilt, but I mean, other emotions, all other emotions, they have a function, a positive function, but shame has absolutely none. And I have thought about this a lot. There is no positive for us as individuals for shame. It has been taught to us. We have been brainwashed to shame, to feel shame, but it's not innate to the human condition.
But it's truly the one artificial emotion.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
So Ren is asking, is there a distinction between the internal voice of shame described here and the kind of ego mind described elsewhere?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, I talk about this. Yeah, it is kind of the ego, but it's the voice that shames you, that says you're not enough, that you're something wrong with you. So it's kind of aspect of that ego. When it goes full on out of control, it becomes very narcissistic, which is what narcissism is. We're in late stage capitalism. Narcissism is an epidemic, and it didn't happen out of thin air. It happened because we're living, breathing in this culture that promotes shame and shaming and, is grandiose and self-important. The voice that I'm talking about is the inner, what's often called the inner critic. So it's kind of aspect of the ego, but it is part of the ego. And we can exorcise this thing. It's kind of like a demon or a parasite that we can that we can exercise from ourselves. We don't need it. It's not something that we ever need. We don't need to be shamed or to be shaming ourselves in order to be better. But that's not the messaging that we're getting from the world.
That was a really good explanation of that. I would simply comment that the in my model, in my experience, the ego is a little bit like what Emma was describing with anger. It is a useful tool when it's a servant, not a master.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And so the ego is not to be confused with the parasite. They are not exactly the same thing.
No, I don't think they're exactly the same thing, but they're kind of an aspect of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a very delicate dance. We could get into this idea that when we receive the dragon or the parasite's operating system as our conscious mind, in some ways that's the egoic aspect of ourselves. But in the freeing of that mind from the control of the dragon or the parasite, we actually let in our subconscious and our unconscious, and these become our new conscious mind. So you're basically upgrading the narcissistic ego to a sense of self that might have egoic qualities, but it is far more transcendent.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that as well, Saab. I think you're definitely onto something there. And yeah, it's a narcissistic operating system. It's the voice that shames you. And you can break up with that voice. That's what I help people do. You can definitely do that. And we need the ego. I've heard it described as the ego, this kind of mask that we need in order to kind of see and perceive in this reality. But we do not need shame. And I've heard people being asked, various spiritual leaders, how do I know if it's the inner critic or if it's my higher self? And it's very simple, really. Is it shaming you? If it's shaming you, that is not your higher wisdom. That's not your insight. That is that narcissist that you've internalized, and that your higher self, your intuition will not shame you. Never.
Right. You might experience other emotions. You might get mad even at yourself. You might be afraid or feel that something bad might happen to you if you continue down this path. Let's say you're doing something very negative for your health, for example. But this is not the same thing as shaming by any means.
No, the voice will not say you're stupid, you're ugly, you're a failure. And how many people's inner critic, inner narcissist says that to them every day?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm getting another question here. Someone is asking, Promethean Pixie, do you think babies in utero can feel shame before birth? For example, if a mother is contemplating abortion and getting rid of this, or is considering giving birth but releasing her child, or a female baby whose father hopes for and prefers a boy, for example.
I mean, emotions do transmit from the mother to the baby, that has been indicated. But I don't believe babies come in with shame. Again, it's something that's transmitted to them by the family, by the society. It's taught. And it's taught by, the mother. If the mother experiences shame, that can be passed on, sure. But, babies when they're born, they're not full of shame. They're free of shame. So I think it happens to some degree in utero, but most of the kind of brainwashing, if you like, that we need shame and of the shame culture happens once we're born. And, after we've kind of been through the baby stage, and we start getting socialized and told that we need shame in order to be a good person.
Yeah, I mean, Freud would go back to the whole fecal period, the anal period, right? And localized shame and our development as some kind of natural thing, apparently.
Yeah.
Which I've never been a very big fan of Freud, to be completely honest. I've always
Yeah.
been a lot more into Reich and Jung. So I don't know what you think about his take on that.
Yeah, and he's not the only one. Like I said, psychotherapy and psychology, it views shame, like I said before, as something that's innate to the human condition. Now, what I'm saying is kind of revolutionary in the aspect that I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think that's complete. It's Shame is a concept. that's been taught to us. And it's been taught to us collectively for thousands of years. And it's become so normalized that we're just breathing it in everywhere and we think it's what it is to be human. But we don't need shame. It's a concept, it's a construct. It's not what it is to be human. It's what it is to what we need to be slaves.
Wow. So, it's a shame we don't have more time, ha. This is this is such an amazing topic. In some ways, it's one of those topics of topics, where it's so integral to everything we experience. If we cannot deal with this thing, then all of our hopes and dreams are basically screwed, as far as I'm concerned. So,
Yeah. I agree with you. The reason why, people try to manifest and create their lives, if you're carrying a lot of shame, it doesn't matter how many affirmations you say and how hard you visualize, the shame will anchor you at that lowest level. So you're going to struggle. It's going to keep you struggling. You've got to exercise that shame first, get rid of that shame first, release that shame first, and then you will, because it's the only shame again. Whoops. It's the only emotion again that's really identity level. It says there's something wrong with you. No other emotion is like that. Shame is the only one that says you are bad. There's something defective with you. No other emotion says that. So it really goes deep. And that's
but
why.
I guess the one that would come closest to that would be guilt.
Yeah, and guilt again, according to the Course in Miracles, guilt again, shame and guilt, that kind of, those two are the, it's the separation, the emotions of separation. We don't need shame and we don't need guilt, but particularly shame is like such a heavy emotion. It's self-attack. We do not need it. Again, for guilt, I would argue we don't need to feel bad. If we've done something wrong, we can recognize, oh my God, I left on the stove and the house near. You don't need to feel bad about it. You just need to change your behavior. But again, we're brainwashed. We're told that you need to feel guilty. And also this idea that if you've done bad things, if you feel enough shame, then you're still a good person, which is total BS. Because the way to change your behavior, This is the real transformation. It doesn't happen from shame. It happens from awareness and actually changing the way you think and feel and behave in the world.
Yeah, actually changing. That's what,
Exactly.
that's a huge piece for people. There's so much sort of chin music that people utilize to make themselves feel as if they're doing something, but they're not actually changing the behaviors that are causing the problem. I see that a lot.
Yeah.
This has been very edifying. It's a really revolutionary stuff that you're doing. I would also recommend that people go and listen to my interview with author Lawrence Gallion, where we got into Reich's work, and there was a lot of conversation about shame and guilt in that context that dovetails very beautifully with what Emma and I have been talking about. I want to thank Emma for being my guest today on Saul Luckman Uncensored. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to speak with you.
Yeah, likewise. Great to connect, Saul. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it's been my pleasure, as I said, and I hope that this gives you a boost on your Substack. I hope people will go subscribe and start reading and interacting and sharing your work. It absolutely deserves to be shared. So thank you for that. Thank you to everybody for showing up, for asking questions and leaving comments. I've been reading your comments. Really, really wonderful stuff. I really appreciate everything that you're saying in the comments, and really, really feel the love. It makes me just full of gratitude. And I'll be having another interview pretty soon. I haven't totally firmed that up, but I will announce it on my Substack. So please stop by. In the meantime, go to traumamatrix.substack.com and saulluckman.substack.com. And please subscribe and have a lovely evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Have a great evening.
Alrighty, over and out.
Over and out. Bye, guys.